Steven Spielberg is not only my favorite director, but he's my favorite filmmaker of all time. So today I'm counting down the top 10 films directed by Steven Spielberg. Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. My name is Gabriel and I love to rank movies. If you can relate, consider hitting that subscribe button. And please know that my list is just my opinion, but I would love to see yours down in the comment section. I also wanted to say that I have seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind, but I just didn't like it very much. So all the fans of that film don't have to ask me where it is on this list down in the comment section. I also just wanted to give 3 shout-outs to some YouTubers that really deserve more credit, and I think that you definitely should go subscribe to them if you like my content. Please go subscribe to Braden Whaler. He does all sorts of stuff, and I think you guys would really enjoy it. Also, go subscribe to Hunter Rui. He does everything from Minecraft gaming to Try Not to Laugh, and some of his videos are pretty great. Also, go subscribe to Hangtime Cole because the dude is just legendary. Number 10 is going to Hook. Yeah, I know a lot of people don't really like Hook, but I just think the film is so fun, and it stars Robin Williams as Peter Pan, so I kind of really like Hook. These great actors, Robin Williams, Dustin Hoffman, Julia Roberts, and Bob Hoskins, just act like they never did grow up, and that's why I love the performances, and that's why I really like this movie. Hook is just a really good adventure film that Steven Spielberg definitely paid off making. I really like this film, and it has some really good performances like I just said. It puts a spin on the classic Peter Pan story, and I actually think it works really well. All of the comedy works pretty well, and this film can have some good action. Easily Spielberg's most underrated film that I think every Spielberg fan should check out, despite the bad reviews it has from critics. I really like this movie, I think it is really good, and I'm glad it made its way onto the number 10 spot. Number 9 is going to Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. So Temple of Doom and The Last Crusade are just tied films for me, but I guess if I were to pick one to make it on the list, I would go with Temple of Doom. I just really love a lot of the stuff that happens in the film, especially the opening scene at Club Obi-Wan, the plane sequence, the bird scene, and just a lot of the stuff in this film is great. But the main flaw I have with it is that it gets way too dark and violent when Indy is actually in the Temple of Doom, and that doesn't really mix well with the tone that the Indiana Jones films are supposed to have. But other than that, Temple of Doom is a great film, just not as great as Spielberg's other films. Also, Short Round. I mean, come on, how could you not like the character Short Round? He's just a great character in a great film. Number 8 is going to go to Saving Private Ryan. So Saving Private Ryan is the most realistic depiction of actual war I've ever seen in a film. Every sequence of war in this film is very realistic, and by the opening scene of the film, you can tell that Steven Spielberg is not going to hold back at all with how brutal World War II actually was. And you can tell that he was trying to make it as accurate as possible by showing every single thing that happens when you are fighting in the war. And let me tell you, it paid off. Like I said earlier, the opening D-Day scene was so brutal, realistic, and amazing. And when that scene was over, I was just amazed, and I realized I still had a nearly 3-hour film ahead of me, and I couldn't wait to see what happened next. Saving Private Ryan is the first film I watched that let me actually experience what war is really like, and I'm glad Spielberg didn't sugarcoat anything. There's so many phenomenal performances from Tom Hanks, Matt Damon, Vin Diesel, and so many more. Saving Private Ryan is not my favorite war film, but that doesn't mean I don't love it, and it is still a heartbreaking and amazing war drama. Number 7 is Minority Report. Minority Report is such a complex movie with a very thought-provoking plot about an organization that arrests the criminals before they commit the crime. When you reach the end, you just feel so satisfied with how the conflict of the story reached a solution, and it was just such a fun ride throughout the whole 2 hours and 25 minutes. When I hear the simple premise of this film, I think the perfect choice for a director would have been Christopher Nolan, to be honest, considering he has made some sci-fi sci-fi films with confusing storylines such as Inception, but I still think that Steven Spielberg did an amazing job making this film. Minority Report just doesn't feel like a Spielberg film. It feels like a Nolan film, but I'm glad Spielberg could make a film even better than Inception, in my opinion. Tom Cruise was fantastic, and sometimes this was also a pretty sad film. The ending was phenomenal, and all the twists and turns were just placed in the film amazingly. While watching the film, I thought it would be my 10th favorite Spielberg film, but just that ending alone made me want to move it up a spot. The ending was incredibly suspenseful, and my goodness, the twist was crazy. Like, it was really tense, and I was clenching up my muscles for the last 15 minutes of that film. Minority Report is a great sci-fi flick, and one of my favorite films directed by Steven Spielberg. Number 6 is Catch Me If You Can. Catch Me If You Can is based on a true story, but it's really hard to believe that some of this actually happened in real life, but it did, and that's the thing that makes this film so interesting. It just has such an over-the-top concept, and I think that makes the film really enjoyable knowing that it actually happened. This film also has some pretty funny scenes, and I think this is probably Spielberg's funniest film. Steven Spielberg was also tackling a very different genre because Catch Me If You Can is not a black and white film about the Holocaust, hard R war film, or a film about an island with dinosaurs. It's just a fun movie about people in real life played by phenomenal actors and actresses. Tom Hanks gives an amazing performance along with Leonardo DiCaprio, and Catch Me If You Can is a great film for Spielberg and a great film in general. Number 5 is Raiders of the Lost Ark. Raiders of the Lost Ark is easily the most iconic film Steven Spielberg has ever made. It's such a quotable movie, and just the character Indiana Jones himself is one of the most iconic characters of all time. This film is also, I dare say, perfectly cast with Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones. So many people say that this is one of the greatest adventure films ever to be released, and I wholeheartedly agree. This film was also made by not only Steven Spielberg, but also George Lucas, the creator of Star Wars. And when you have Spielberg's amazing directing skills along with George Lucas producing the film, you know you're going to get a fantastic movie. And that's what we got, and I couldn't live with myself if Raiders of the Lost Ark wasn't in my top 5. Number 4 is going to Schindler's List. Now I know some people are already getting mad because Schindler's List is only number 4 on this list, but you have to remember that this is a favorites list, and I can't necessarily say I'm going to want to rewatch this movie as much as others, but Schindler's List is still without a doubt the most well-made film on this list, and if I were basing this list off the actual filmmaking, it would be my number 1. That's mostly because of the really heavy subject matter it deals with. It's just such a meaningful film, and I think that every decision the crew made while making this film was perfect, and that leads to a perfect movie about the Holocaust and how bad the Nazis actually were. This is without a doubt and easily the saddest movie I've ever seen, and one of the best, if not the best movie I have ever seen. But even though it is the best, that doesn't mean it's my favorite. Number 3 is E.T. the Extraterrestrial. For me, this is one of Steven Spielberg's many masterpieces. Honestly, it's hard to find something wrong with it. Okay, my only flaw with the film is that E.T. looks like a raisin. I mean, the puppetry itself was fine, but I'm not sure about the age rating because raisins are pretty scary. E.T. is also the film that introduced me to Steven Spielberg. It was the first film I'd watched that he made, and before I watched it, I didn't even know who Spielberg was. My initial reaction to hearing about him was, what kind of name is Spielberg? It's not only one of my favorite Spielberg films, but it's one of his best, with a lot of iconic scenes that if you haven't seen this movie, you've probably seen or heard of before, which just shows that I think that E.T. the Extraterrestrial deserves to be in the top 3 Spielberg films. My runner-up is going to be Jaws. Jaws is just amazing. Some people call this a horror movie, some people don't, and I'm kind of right in the middle because it's not like a horror movie, but it is kind of scary at times. I mean, it scares the audience even though you don't actually physically see the shark until at least the last half of the movie. But if you do consider it as a horror movie, Jaws would be my favorite. It also features one of my favorite scores in all of cinema by John Williams that makes the film even more suspenseful and puts even more fear into the audience. The three main leads, including Roy Schneider, Robert Shaw, and Richard Dreyfuss, create such a great trio with some great characterization. The script is also brilliant, and I think that Steven Spielberg just did a fantastic job making this film. But for honorable mentions, I have to give Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade and The Adventures of Tintin some credit because those are both some pretty good films. The Adventures of Tintin has some pretty mediocre animation, but I think the film itself is pretty good, just too forgettable to be in my top 10 Spielberg movies. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade is a really good film. They just made some decisions that I wouldn't make while making the film. I like it the same as Temple of Doom, and they're both equally great. But if I were to pick one, I would pick Temple of Doom, like you saw earlier. But The Last Crusade is still fantastic. But in first place is easily Jurassic Park. My goodness, Jurassic Park is in my eyes a masterpiece. I love all of the characters. I think they all are interesting, especially Dr. Alan Grant, John Hammond, and Ian Malcolm. Everything in this film is fantastic. All of the suspense, all of the action, all of the adventure in this film is phenomenal. And on top of that, you also have a perfect score from John Williams that is both majestic and beautiful. It's hard to put into words how much I love this film. This film is one of the main reasons I love Steven Spielberg, and one of the main reasons I love adventure/thriller films. This film is also one of the most rewatchable I have ever seen. Even people that don't like this movie can admit that this film has some spectacular suspense and a spectacular soundtrack. I can't think of any flaws in this film, and for me, Jurassic Park is my favorite movie of all time. It's such a memorable movie, and it is my favorite of Spielberg's filmography.